A millionaire hires a pregnant maid to clean for him, but he freezes when she says her name. What should have been just another cold business deal suddenly rips open the wounds of his past. Because this isn't just any maid, and her child isn't just any child. At first, he sees only a stranger scrubbing his floors. But then, late one night, the little boy looks up at him and whispers the words that change everything. "Mommy says you're my daddy." Now, a lifetime of secrets threatens to explode. A broken past collides with an uncertain future. And one decision will determine if love can heal betrayal or destroy them all over again. Will he risk everything to face the truth or walk away once more? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today if you enjoy stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe for more. Ethan Caldwell stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his mansion's east wing, watching the sunrise paint the manicured lawn in hues of gold. The pristine gardens, perfectly trimmed hedges, and spotless marble fountains reflected his obsession with order and control. Yet all this perfection felt hollow, much like the vast emptiness that had taken residence in his heart 5 years ago. His fingers absently traced the cold glass, following a path similar to the one his thoughts always took, back to that rainy night when he lost everything. His wife Caroline's gentle laugh, her excitement about their unborn child, the flash of headlights, all gone in an instant. The doctors had said it was quick, but that brought little comfort to the man left behind. "Mr. Caldwell." Mrs. Henderson's sharp voice cut through his brooding. He turned to face his housekeeper of 15 years, her usually neat appearance somewhat disheveled, her face flushed with anger. "I simply cannot work like this anymore." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What seems to be the problem now, Mrs. Henderson?" "The problem? You want to know the problem?" She thrust a piece of paper at him, his latest list of requirements. 47 specific instructions just for cleaning the kitchen, measuring the exact distance between place settings, counting the dust particles on the chandeliers. "I expect perfection in my home. You've always known this. Perfection is one thing, Mr. Caldwell. This," she gestured around the immaculate room, "this is madness." "I'm done." His eyes narrowed. "Done?" "Yes, done. I quit. Effective immediately." She untied her apron with trembling fingers. "Find someone else to meet your impossible standards." Panic flared in Ethan's chest, though his face remained stone cold. "You can't just leave. There are procedures. I've already called your assistant, Mr. Phillips. My resignation letter will be on his desk this morning." She placed her apron on a nearby chair, perfectly folded despite her anger. "Goodbye, Mr. Caldwell. I truly hope you find peace someday." The slam of the front door echoed through the empty halls, leaving Ethan in suffocating silence. Within an hour, his phone rang. Thomas Phillips, his ever-efficient assistant. "I've already started looking for replacements," Thomas said without preamble. "There's an agency." "No agencies," Ethan cut in. "I want someone thoroughly vetted. Sir, with all due respect, we need someone quickly. I've found a promising candidate, a young woman named Sophia, excellent references, available immediately." Ethan paced his study, agitation evident in every step. "I don't want some random person in my home." "Then perhaps you should have treated Mrs. Henderson better," Thomas replied, his usual professionalism tinged with frustration. "Sophia will be there this afternoon. Please just meet her." After several tense moments, Ethan grudgingly agreed. He spent the next few hours scrutinizing every corner of his already perfect home, his anxiety mounting with each passing minute. At precisely 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Muttering under his breath about punctuality being the bare minimum requirement, Ethan strode to the front door. He yanked it open, prepared to deliver his usual intimidating first impression. Instead, he froze. A young woman stood on his doorstep, her hands resting protectively over her clearly pregnant belly. Beside her, clutching her skirt, stood a small boy with wide, cautious eyes. She offered a hesitant smile that did nothing to mask her obvious nervousness. "Mr. Caldwell? I'm Sophia. Thomas Phillips sent me about the housekeeping position." Sophia Martinez stepped through the grand double doors of the Caldwell mansion, her heart pounding against her ribs. The entryway alone was bigger than her entire apartment. Crystal chandeliers caught the morning light, scattering rainbow fragments across marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. Her small son Mateo clutched her hand tightly, his dark eyes wide with wonder. "I trust you can begin immediately." Ethan Caldwell's cold voice cut through her awe. He towered over her, his steel-gray eyes scanning her from head to toe, lingering disapprovingly on her rounded belly. "The previous housekeeper left things unsatisfactory." Sophia straightened her shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "Yes, sir. I can start right away." She squeezed Mateo's hand gently. "My son will stay close to me and won't cause any trouble." "See that he doesn't," Ethan replied curtly, turning on his heel. "The cleaning supplies are in the utility room. First floor needs attention today." Sophia got straight to work, her movements careful but efficient as she dusted elaborate wooden furniture and polished silverware that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Despite her pregnancy, she maintained a steady pace, years of experience guiding her hands. Mateo followed behind her like a quiet shadow, occasionally reaching out to touch a shiny vase or peer at his reflection in the spotless surfaces. "Mama," he whispered, "this house is like a castle." Sophia smiled warmly at her son. "Yes, mi amor, but remember, look with your eyes, not your hands." From his study, Ethan found his attention repeatedly drawn to the new housekeeper. He had expected her to struggle, to complain, or to take frequent breaks. Instead, she worked with quiet determination, her movements graceful despite her condition. The way she balanced her work with gentle reminders to her son showed a patience he hadn't anticipated. The peaceful routine was suddenly broken by a sharp gasp and the wobble of pottery. Mateo had bumped into a side table, sending an antique vase teetering precariously. Sophia moved with surprising speed, steadying both her son and the vase in one fluid motion. "I'm sorry, Mama." Mateo's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't mean to." Sophia knelt beside him, her round belly making the movement awkward, but her touch gentle as she wiped his cheeks. "She is to be my love. No harm done. But this is why we must be extra careful in such a beautiful house, yes?" Watching from behind his partially open study door, Ethan felt an unexpected twinge in his chest. The tender scene before him stirred something he thought long buried, a memory of warmth, of family, of love. He quickly turned away, unsettled by the foreign sensation, but found himself unable to completely shake the image of mother and child from his mind. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 6 times as Sophia finished wiping down the last surface in the kitchen. Her feet ached from the long day of work, but satisfaction warmed her chest at how much she'd accomplished. The mansion's surfaces now gleamed with renewed life. "Mrs. Martinez." Ethan Caldwell's stern voice made her jump. He stood in the kitchen doorway, his tall frame casting a long shadow. "A moment in my study, please. There are some formalities we need to address." Sophia followed him down the hallway, her sensible shoes quiet against the polished floor. The study was an impressive room lined with dark wooden bookshelves and leather-bound volumes. A massive mahogany desk dominated the space, its surface organized with military precision. Ethan settled into his leather chair, not offering her a seat. "I need your full legal name for the employment records," he said without looking up from his papers. "Sophia Martinez," she replied simply, her hands clasped in front of her. The pen in Ethan's hand froze mid-stroke. His face went pale, as if he'd seen a ghost. For a moment, he seemed to stop breathing entirely. That name. It couldn't be. Images crashed through his mind like a tidal wave. A young woman with laughing eyes and a bright smile. Summer afternoons in the park, whispered promises under starlit skies. Sophia Martinez. the woman he'd loved with all his heart 12 years ago, before his family had threatened to destroy her reputation if he didn't end things. The woman whose heart he'd broken, walking away despite her tears and pleas to fight for their love. But this couldn't be the same. Sophia. His Sophia had moved away, disappearing from his life completely. This was just a cruel coincidence. Surely. Ethan forced his features into a mask of indifference, though his hands trembled slightly as he set down his pen. "That will be all," he said curtly, his voice rougher than usual. "You may go." Sophia nodded and left quietly, closing the door behind her. As soon as he was alone, Ethan yanked open his desk drawer and pulled out an old photograph he hadn't looked at in years. The edges were worn soft from handling, though he'd locked it away long ago. Trying to bury the past. In the photo, a younger version of himself smiled at the camera, his arm around a beautiful young woman with warm brown eyes and a radiant smile. Sophia Martinez, as she'd been 12 years ago. The same name, the same gentle presence. Could it really be her? Ethan stared at the photograph, his chest tight with regret and disbelief. Was fate playing some kind of cruel trick, bringing a woman with her name into his home? Or was this the ghost of his greatest mistake coming back to haunt him? The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the mansion, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Ethan deliberately took the long way to his study, avoiding the areas where he knew Sophia would be working. His mind was still reeling from yesterday's revelation about her identity, and he couldn't bear to face her just yet. As he strode down the hallway, the soft patter of small feet caught his attention. He glanced back to see Mateo, Sophia's young son, trailing behind him like a curious puppy. The boy's eyes were wide with wonder, taking in the paintings and decorations that lined the walls. Ethan quickened his pace, but Mateo kept up, following him right into the study. The boy's presence made Ethan uncomfortable. There was something about his innocent face that stirred memories he'd rather forget. "Mr. Caldwell?" Mateo's small voice broke the silence. He stood in the middle of the study, looking up at Ethan with those big, earnest eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Yes?" Ethan replied stiffly, moving behind his desk as if seeking a barrier between them. Mateo took a step closer, his small hands clasped in front of him. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He froze, his hand gripping the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. The room seemed to spin around him as shock, guilt, and confusion crashed over him in waves. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. How could he possibly respond to such an innocent statement that carried such enormous implications? His mind raced through calculations, Sophia, the timing, the boy's age, everything suddenly clicking into place with devastating clarity. Mateo continued to look at him expectantly, waiting for a response that Ethan couldn't give. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Ethan managed to croak out, I think you should go find your mother now." The boy's face fell slightly, but he nodded and turned to leave the study. His small shoulders slumped in disappointment. The soft click of the door closing behind him seemed to echo in the suddenly too quiet room. Ethan collapsed into his leather chair, his legs no longer able to support him. His perfectly ordered world was crumbling around him. He ran his trembling hands through his hair, his breath coming in short gasps. Alone at his desk, surrounded by the trappings of his wealth and success, Ethan felt more lost than he'd ever been. The question he'd been avoiding since seeing Sophia again now demanded an answer. Could it be true? He whispered to himself, his voice barely audible in the silent room. The evening shadows lengthened across Ethan's study as he stood by the window, watching Sophia finish her cleaning duties in the garden below. His heart hammered against his chest as he rehearsed the words he needed to say. When she came in to collect her things, he called out to her, "Sophia, we need to talk." His voice was steadier than he felt. She turned, her dark eyes wary. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell." "Is Mateo?" He paused, throat tight. Is he my son? The color drained from Sophia's face. Her hands began to shake as she gripped the cleaning cloth tightly. How dare you? She whispered, her voice trembling with rage and hurt. I need to know the truth, Ethan pressed, taking a step toward her. The truth? Sophia's laugh was bitter. The truth is that I loved a man once. A man who promised me the world and then disappeared without a word. When his family disapproved, tears glistened in her eyes. He abandoned me when I needed him most, leaving me to face everything alone. Sophia, please, no. She cut him off sharply. You don't get to ask these questions. You're my employer, nothing more. The father of my child is gone, and that's all you need to know. Ethan's guilt churned in his stomach. He recognized the pain in her voice, pain he had caused. I understand, he said quietly. But I want you to know that your position here is secure. In fact, I'd like to offer you a permanent role with better pay and benefits. Sophia's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Why? It's purely business, he lied, keeping his voice professional. You're an excellent worker, and finding good help is difficult. Sophia stood silent for a long moment, weighing his words. Finally, she nodded slowly. I'll stay, she said, her voice cold as ice. Because I need this job. But understand this, Mr. Caldwell, you can't buy your way into our lives. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow, but he maintained his composed facade. He watched as Sophia gathered her belongings, her movements sharp with barely contained emotion. The truth hung heavy between them, unspoken but undeniable. As she walked out of his study with her head held high, the days that followed held a delicate tension in the mansion. Sophia watched from doorways and corners as her son gravitated toward Ethan, her heart a tangle of conflicting emotions. She couldn't deny the natural way Mateo's eyes lit up whenever Ethan entered a room, or how the boy trailed after him like a faithful shadow. Mr. Caldwell, can I help? Mateo's small voice would pipe up whenever Ethan pulled out tools to fix something around the house. One afternoon, Ethan was repairing a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen. Sophia paused her dusting to observe as he showed Mateo how to hold a screwdriver properly. Like this, buddy. Keep your hands steady, Ethan explained patiently, his large hands guiding Mateo's tiny ones. Now turn it to the right, righty-tighty, remember? Righty-tighty. Mateo echoed with a giggle, concentrating hard as he turned the screwdriver. These moments multiplied as days passed. Ethan found himself looking for small projects. A squeaky door here, a wobbly table there, creating opportunities to teach. Sophia noticed how he'd gotten into the habit of explaining everything he did, breaking down complex tasks into simple steps that a 5-year-old could understand. See this level? Ethan would say, holding up the tool. It helps us make sure everything is straight. Want to try? Mateo would nod eagerly, his small hands reaching for whatever tool Ethan offered. There was something about these quiet moments of instruction that softened the hard edges around Ethan's heart. One evening, after a full day of helping Ethan with various repairs, Mateo could barely keep his eyes open during dinner. Sophia had agreed to let them stay late, seeing how happy her son was. Time for bed, little man, Ethan said softly, noting Mateo's drooping eyelids. Can you tuck me in? Mateo asked sleepily, reaching for Ethan's hand. Sophia's breath caught, but she nodded when Ethan glanced at her questioningly. She watched as Ethan led Mateo to the guest room, carrying the boy's favorite stuffed dinosaur that he'd brought from home. In the guest room, Ethan helped Mateo into bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. The boy snuggled down into the plush pillows, clutching his dinosaur close. Something stirred in Ethan's chest, an unfamiliar warmth that spread through him as he smoothed Mateo's dark hair back from his forehead. Good night, buddy, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't quite name. Night, Mateo mumbled. Already half asleep. Ethan stood there for a moment, watching the steady rise and fall of the boy's chest, feeling something he hadn't experienced in years, the quiet joy of caring for someone else, the tender weight of responsibility that came with being trusted by a child. In that moment, he understood what it meant to be a father. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the mansion's windows as Ethan walked down the hallway, his footsteps echoing against the marble floors. A muffled sound caught his attention, the distinct struggle of someone carrying something too heavy. Following the noise, he found Sophia in the laundry room, attempting to lift an overloaded basket of wet sheets. "Let me help you with that," Ethan said, stepping forward before she could protest. His hands gripped the plastic handles of the basket, brushing against her fingers for a brief moment. Sophia stepped back, her shoulders tense. "I can manage, Mr. Caldwell. It's my job. You shouldn't be lifting heavy things in your condition," he insisted, already carrying the basket toward the back patio where the clothesline stood. Sophia followed, her arms crossed protectively over her growing belly dot as they hung the sheets together in silence. The spring breeze carried the sweet scent of nearby flowering trees. Sophia's hands moved with practiced efficiency, but her movements were slower than usual, betraying her exhaustion. "How did you do it?" Ethan finally asked, his voice quiet. "Raising Mateo alone all these years?" Sophia paused, a clothespin halfway to the line. "I did what I had to do," she said, her voice tight with emotion. Sometimes that meant cleaning houses during the day and working at a diner at night. Sometimes it meant choosing between paying for heat or buying new shoes for Mateo. She pinned the sheet with more force than necessary. "People would look at me, a young single Latina mother, and make assumptions. Landlords wouldn't rent to me. Better paying jobs always seemed to go to someone else. But Mateo," her voice softened, "Mateo gave me strength. Every smile, every little milestone, it made everything worth it." Ethan stood still, holding the other end of the sheet, his knuckles white against the damp fabric. "I lost my wife Rachel 3 years ago," he said suddenly, the words spilling out like water from a broken dam. "She was 6 months pregnant. The doctor said it was a rare complication, nothing anyone could have done." He swallowed hard. "Since then, I've just been existing, going through the motions. The house, the business, it's all just empty routine." They finished hanging the last sheet in silence, then sat down on a nearby garden bench. The white sheets billowed like sails in the breeze, creating a peaceful curtain between them and the rest of the world. "I'm sorry," Sophia said softly, and Ethan knew she meant it, not just for his loss, but for everything. They sat there, side by side, neither speaking. The space between them felt different now, no longer the rigid distance between employer and employee, but something more complex, more human. Their shared pain and struggles had created an unexpected bridge, connecting two hearts that had been carefully guarded for far too long. The sheets continued their gentle dance in the wind, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear Mateo's laughter floating through an open window. The weekend morning dawned bright and clear as Ethan pulled his sleek black car into the driveway where Sophia and Mateo waited. He had surprised them both the evening before by suggesting a trip to the local farmer's market, and now Mateo bounced excitedly on his toes while Sophia stood uncertainly beside him. "Ready for an adventure?" Ethan asked, his usually stern expression softening as Mateo ran to the car with a cheerful yes. The farmer's market sprawled across a sun-dappled town square, filled with colorful stalls and the mouth-watering aromas of fresh bread and flowers. Mateo's eyes grew wide at the sight of everything, tugging at both Sophia's and Ethan's hands as he pointed at different vendors. "Look at the honey jars. And the pretty flowers," Mateo exclaimed, leading them from stall to stall. Sophia relaxed gradually as they wandered, accepting samples of fresh peaches and watching Mateo's delight at tasting local honey. Ethan found himself enjoying their simple pleasure, watching how Sophia's face lit up when she discovered fresh herbs she could use for cooking. "These would be perfect for that soup you made last week," Ethan said. Picking up a bunch of fresh thyme, Sophia smiled tentatively, reaching for the herbs. "You noticed?" The peaceful moment shattered when a sharp voice cut through the market chatter. "Ethan Caldwell, is that you?" A well-dressed woman in her 50s approached, her eyes moving critically between Ethan and his companions. "I hardly recognized you, being so domestic. And with your maid, no less." Her lips curved in a cruel smile as she looked Sophia up and down. Sophia's face flushed deep red, her hand instinctively tightening around Mateo's. The little boy looked confused. Pressing closer to his mother's side, Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes turning to steel. "Margaret," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Sophia is not my maid. She is my guest, and I won't tolerate anyone speaking to her with such disrespect." Margaret's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Well, I never. Then perhaps you should start." Ethan cut her off sharply. "Sophia is worth 10 of you, and I suggest you remember that." "Come on," he said more gently to Sophia and Mateo, placing a protective hand on Sophia's back. "I think I saw some strawberries Mateo might like." The rest of their market visit passed in a blur, with Ethan making sure to treat Sophia with extra consideration, carrying their purchases and including her in every decision. When they returned home that evening, after Mateo had gone to bed, Sophia found Ethan in his study. "Thank you," she said softly from the doorway, her eyes meeting his with a new warmth. "For what you did at the market today." The moment hung between them, fragile and significant, as something in Sophia's guarded expression finally began to thaw. Days that followed brought unexpected warmth to the mansion's cold halls. In the spacious kitchen, Ethan discovered a forgotten joy in cooking, something he hadn't done since his wife's passing. He found himself preparing elaborate dinners, watching with quiet satisfaction as Sophia's eyes widened at each new dish he presented. "You never told me you could cook," Sophia said one evening, watching him stir a pot of homemade pasta sauce. "There's a lot you don't know about me," Ethan replied softly, adding fresh herbs from his garden. The sound of Sophia's laughter began to fill the house more frequently. It started as small chuckles at Mateo's antics, then grew into full musical peals of joy that made Ethan's heart skip a beat. One afternoon, while watching Mateo chase butterflies in the garden, she laughed so freely that Ethan couldn't help but stare, mesmerized by how her entire face lit up. Mateo thrived in the mansion's extensive gardens, his small feet carrying him between flowering bushes and along stone pathways. "Look, look," he would call out, discovering new treasures. A shiny pebble, a particularly interesting leaf, or a colorful flower. Ethan found himself following the boy's adventures, offering gentle guidance about which plants were safe to touch and which needed to be admired from afar. As the days passed, Ethan felt something shift inside him. The way Sophia tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, how she hummed softly while folding laundry, the gentle strength in her hands as she worked, all of it awakened feelings he thought had died years ago. He realized with both joy and trepidation that he was falling in love with her all over again. Sophia, too, began to lower her defenses. She no longer flinched when Ethan entered a room, and sometimes their eyes would meet across the dinner table in moments of shared understanding. Yet doubt still clouded her expression when he showed particular kindness, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, they sat before the crackling fireplace. Mateo had gone to bed, leaving them in a comfortable silence. The flames cast dancing shadows across Sophia's face as she worked on mending one of Mateo's shirts. Ethan watched her, his heart pounding. The words sat on the tip of his tongue. How sorry he was for the past. How much he cared for her and Mateo, how he wanted to make things right. The firelight made her skin glow, and when she looked up at him questioningly, he saw something soft and hopeful in her eyes. But fear gripped him, fear of rejection, fear of ruining the delicate trust they'd built. The moment stretched between them like a thread about to snap. Finally, Ethan looked away, swallowing his confession. The opportunity slipped away as Sophia returned to her sewing, though her shoulders slumped slightly with what might have been disappointment. Sophia noticed it first thing in the morning. A cream-colored envelope slipped under her bedroom door. The expensive paper felt heavy in her hands as she picked it up, her heart skipping a beat at the elegant Caldwell family crest embossed in gold on the front. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was precise and aristocratic, each word carefully chosen for maximum impact. Dear Ms. Martinez, we are writing to address your current situation with our son, Ethan Caldwell. It has come to our attention that you have insinuated yourself into his household, no doubt with intentions to trap him through your pregnancy and your claims regarding your son. Let us be perfectly clear. The Caldwell family will not tolerate such manipulation. Should you continue this charade, we will be forced to make public certain details about your past that would prove most embarrassing. Your reputation, already questionable, would not survive such scrutiny. We trust you remember how this ended before. Ethan knows his duty to this family. Do not force our hand. Regards, the Caldwell family. Sophia's legs gave out, and she sank onto the edge of her bed. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes, each line hitting her like a physical blow. The memory of that day 7 years ago came rushing back, standing alone in the rain, reading Ethan's goodbye letter, her hand pressed against her still flat stomach where their child grew. She glanced around the room that had started to feel like home. The morning sun streamed through the windows, highlighting the photographs of Mateo she'd placed on the dresser, the small vase of flowers Ethan had brought her yesterday. All of it suddenly felt like a cruel joke. Not again, she whispered, wiping her eyes. I can't do this again. Sophia moved quietly through the room, pulling out her suitcase from under the bed. She knew Ethan was still asleep. He always slept late on Sundays. Her hands shook as she began folding clothes, packing away the life they'd started to build. Tears fell silently onto each garment as she worked. She could hear Mateo's soft breathing from the adjoining room where he slept. Her sweet boy, who had finally started to know his father. The thought made fresh tears spill down her cheeks. But she had to protect him, protect them both, from the pain she knew was coming. Better to leave now, on her own terms, than face the humiliation and heartbreak of being cast aside again. As she zipped up the suitcase, Sophia's gaze fell on the letter lying on her bed. The cruel words seemed to mock her, reminding her that some things never changed. The Caldwells would always see her as beneath them, and Ethan, no matter how gentle he'd been lately, would always be their son first. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the mansion, but the warmth couldn't penetrate the sudden chill that gripped Ethan's heart. Something felt wrong the moment he opened his eyes. The house was too quiet, missing the gentle sounds of Sophia preparing breakfast or Mateo's cheerful morning chatter. Sophia? He called out, his voice echoing through the empty hallways. No response. Mateo? Still silence. Panic rising in his chest, Ethan rushed through the house, checking each room. The guest bedroom where they stayed was empty, the beds neatly made as if they'd never been there. Their few belongings were gone. In the kitchen, the coffee maker sat cold and unused. No breakfast dishes in the sink. No sign of life. His hands trembling, Ethan noticed something on the kitchen counter. A familiar cream-colored envelope with the Caldwell family crest. His stomach twisted as he picked it up, already knowing what he would find inside. The letter was cruel and precise, every word designed to wound and intimidate. His family's handiwork, threatening Sophia with public humiliation and legal action if she didn't leave immediately. No, Ethan whispered, crumpling the letter in his fist. History was repeating itself, just as it had years ago when his family had forced him to abandon Sophia the first time. The same tactics, the same threats, The same heartless manipulation. Memories flooded back. Sophia's tears when he'd left her all those years ago. Pregnant and alone. The way she'd begged him to choose love over family duty. And now, just when he'd found her again, just when they were building something real and beautiful, his family had destroyed it all over again. Ethan stumbled into his study, the weight of his failure crushing him. The room that had once been his sanctuary now felt like a prison, filled with the ghosts of his mistakes. The morning light caught a photo on his desk. Mateo's bright smile captured just days ago as they worked together in the garden. His legs gave out, and Ethan fell to his knees beside his desk. Tears he'd held back for years finally broke free. "God," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion, "help me not to fail them again." The words hung in the air of the empty study, a prayer and a promise combined. He couldn't let history repeat itself. He couldn't lose them again. With trembling hands, Ethan dialed his assistant's number. "Sarah, I need your help. Sophia and Mateo are gone. Please, you have to help me find them. Mr. Caldwell, calm down." Sarah's steady voice came through the phone. "Let me make some calls." The next 30 minutes felt like torture as Ethan paced his study, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. When his phone finally rang, he grabbed it before the first ring ended. "I found her," Sarah said. "She's volunteering at the Hope Haven Women's Shelter downtown. She's been helping there for years, actually." Ethan grabbed his car keys without even hanging up. "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you." Dark clouds hung low over the city as Ethan drove through the rain-slicked streets. His windshield wipers worked overtime against the downpour, matching the frantic rhythm of his heart. At every red light, he rehearsed what he would say to Sophia. "I'm sorry," he practiced, gripping the steering wheel. "I was a coward back then. I let my family control me. But I'm not that man anymore." The words felt hollow, inadequate for the pain he'd caused. "Please give me another chance," he whispered to himself as lightning flashed across the sky. "I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you and Mateo." Shelter was a modest brick building with a small sign out front. Ethan parked across the street, his hands shaking as he turned off the engine. Through the foggy windows of the shelter's cafeteria, he could see people moving about. Then he saw her. Sophia stood behind a serving counter, wearing a simple apron over her clothes. She was ladling soup into bowls, offering warm smiles to the women who came through the line. Even from here, he could see the gentleness in her movements, the care she took with each person she served. A woman with 2 small children approached the counter. Sophia's face lit up as she spoke to the children, slipping them extra rolls when she thought no one was looking. She reached across the counter to squeeze the mother's hand in encouragement. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This was Sophia, not just the young woman he'd foolishly abandoned years ago, but the strong, compassionate person she'd become. She'd taken her own pain and transformed it into a mission to help others. While he'd been hiding in his mansion, she'd been out here, making a real difference in people's lives. His love for her deepened in that moment, expanding beyond their shared past into something new and profound. He loved her not just for their memories or even for Mateo, but for who she was now, this remarkable woman who had every right to be bitter but chose kindness instead. Through the rain-streaked window, Ethan watched as Sophia continued her work, her gentle strength touching everyone around her. And he knew with absolute certainty that he would do whatever it took to win back her trust. Ethan pushed open the heavy wooden door of Hope Haven Women's Shelter, his expensive suit and polished shoes a stark contrast to the humble surroundings. Heads turned as he entered, conversations dropping to whispers. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he scanned the room, his heart pounding. There she was, wearing a simple apron and serving soup to a line of women. Sophia looked up at the sudden silence, and the ladle slipped from her hand, clattering against the metal pot. Her face went pale, and she gripped the edge of the serving table to steady herself. "Sophia," Ethan's voice carried across the room. He walked forward, ignoring the curious stares. "Please, just listen to me." Matteo peeked out from behind his mother's legs, his eyes wide with recognition. "Mr. Ethan?" Ethan's voice shook as he began speaking, loud enough for everyone to hear. "5 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I let my family's prejudice and my own cowardice tear us apart." His eyes never left Sophia's face. "I abandoned you when you needed me most, when you were carrying our child." Murmurs rippled through the room as women and volunteers gathered closer, drawn to the unfolding drama. "My family threatened to cut me off, to ruin your reputation. I chose their money and status over love." Ethan's voice cracked. "Then I lost my wife and unborn child in an accident, and I thought it was punishment for what I'd done to you." Sophia's hands trembled as she untied her apron, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But meeting you again, seeing the amazing woman you've become, watching how wonderfully you've raised our son." Ethan slowly dropped to one knee, right there on the shelter's worn linoleum floor. "I don't care what my family thinks anymore. I don't care about their money or their threats. I care about you, Sophia, about Matteo." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging for a second chance. Let me be the husband I should have been, the father Matteo deserves. I promise I'll spend every day making up for lost time, showing you both how much I love you." The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone held their breath, waiting for Sophia's response. Sophia's tears finally spilled over. With a sob, she rushed forward and threw her arms around Ethan's neck, nearly knocking him backward. "Don't you dare let go this time," she whispered fiercely against his shoulder, her voice thick with emotion. Ethan wrapped his arms tightly around her, his own tears falling freely now. "Never again," he promised, holding her close as the shelter erupted in applause and cheers around them. The small chapel glowed with warm morning light, streaming through stained glass windows. White roses and baby's breath decorated the wooden pews, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Sophia stood in the tiny back room, smoothing her simple white dress. Nothing fancy, just a modest lace gown that made her eyes shine. "You look beautiful, Mommy," Matteo exclaimed, bouncing on his toes in his new suit. He clutched the small velvet pillow holding 2 golden rings, taking his ring-bearer duties very seriously. Down the hall, Ethan adjusted his tie in another room, his hands trembling slightly. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind after he'd severed ties with his family. Their final cruel ultimatum, choose between them or Sophia, had made the decision surprisingly easy. He'd chosen love, the wooden pews filled with familiar faces from Hope Haven Women's Shelter. The same women who had witnessed Ethan's heartfelt proposal now dabbed happy tears, watching this fairy tale unfold. They had helped arrange everything, from the flowers to the cake, making this truly a community celebration. As the piano began playing, Matteo walked down the aisle first, concentrating hard on each step. The rings barely wobbled on their pillow as he made his way to the front, beaming with pride. When Sophia appeared in the doorway, Ethan's breath caught. She walked alone, her head held high, no longer the timid maid who had first entered his mansion. Their eyes met and held, speaking volumes of the journey that had brought them here. Standing before the minister, they joined hands. Ethan's voice was thick with emotion as he spoke his vows. "Sophia, I abandoned you once out of weakness and fear. But God gave us a second chance, and I promise to spend every day making up for lost time. I vow to love you and Matteo unconditionally, to protect and cherish you both, and to thank God every day for bringing you back into my life." Sophia's eyes glistened as she responded, "Ethan, you've shown me that love can heal old wounds and create new beginnings. I vow to stand beside you, to trust in our future together, and to build the family we were always meant to be." They exchanged rings, Matteo proudly presenting them at just the right moment. As the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan leaned in to kiss his bride. Their lips had barely touched when Mateo's excited voice rang out through the chapel. "That's my mommy and daddy." The entire congregation burst into laughter and tears, the joyful innocence of his words capturing the miracle of this moment perfectly. Love had transformed a cold mansion into a warm home, a lonely man into a loving father, and 3 separate hearts into one family. The mansion hummed with new life as Sophia moved through the rooms, adding touches of warmth to every corner. Colorful throw pillows brightened the stern leather sofas, while family photos now graced the once bare walls. The scent of fresh-baked cookies wafted from the kitchen, replacing the sterile emptiness that had lingered for so long. Mateo's laughter echoed through the halls as he zoomed his toy cars across the polished floors. "Vroom, watch out, Daddy," he called out as Ethan playfully jumped aside, his own deep chuckle joining his son's giggles. Sophia emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Dinner's ready," she announced, smiling at her 2 boys roughhousing in the hallway. The dining room table, once a lonely expanse of mahogany, now felt cozy with its cheerful centerpiece and place settings for 3. They gathered around the table, joining hands naturally. Ethan's voice was soft but steady as he said grace. "Dear Lord, thank you for this food, for this family, and for second chances. Thank you for showing us that love can heal all wounds. Amen. Amen." Mateo echoed enthusiastically, making his parents smile. Over plates of Sophia's homemade enchiladas, they shared stories and laughter. Mateo regaled them with tales from his day of exploration in the mansion's garden, while Ethan and Sophia exchanged tender glances across the table. As evening settled in, Ethan led Mateo upstairs for bedtime. The boys' room, once a stark guest chamber, now sparkled with superhero decals and a nightlight casting gentle stars across the ceiling. Tucking the blankets around his son, Ethan felt a fullness in his heart he'd thought lost forever. "Good night, Daddy," Mateo whispered sleepily, his eyes already drooping. Ethan's eyes welled with tears as he bent to kiss his son's forehead. This simple moment, this precious gift of being called Daddy, it was everything he'd never known he needed. In the quiet of his son's room, he knew with absolute certainty that love had truly won. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.